After months of silence broken by sirens, after skies that once glowed with fire and fear, the sounds of home begin to return. Families step across familiar streets, now changed but not forgotten. Every stone, every wall, every olive tree still remembers the names once whispered beneath them.
Just hours before the ceasefire began, clouds of smoke filled the air early this morning. Israel kept bombing before it came into effect, but the smoke must now clear, the clock ticking on each step of this first phase. And step one, the Israeli military, having been given 24 hours to withdraw to the lines agreed, says it has done so. Aid must now be allowed into Gaza and Israeli hostages freed by Hamas by lunchtime on Monday. Then Palestinian prisoners and detainees released as well. Both Israelis and Palestinians alike rejoiced when the deal was announced. But in Gaza much earlier today, some of the 2 million people displaced have to now see it to believe it.
We hope that this suffering will end and that all the people of the earth will live in safety and peace. Everyone who has lived around us, near us and far from us, and that no people will go through what we have gone through.
Israel, even at the current line, will still control more than 50% of Gaza. And the Israeli Prime Minister, having been under intense pressure at home and abroad, insisting that the war was not aimless.
Today we are marking one of our great achievements, the return of all our hostages, both living and dead. This is a central goal, a goal which we have adhered to all along the way, throughout the 2 years that have passed since the beginning of the war. I promised the families of the hostages, and I also promised you, citizens of Israel, that we will return everybody, without exception. We promised it, and we are fulfilling it.
US officials are moving troops based in the Middle East into Israel. They say it's to coordinate the next steps. Donald Trump is due to visit the region in the coming days. The Nobel Peace Prize winner was announced today, and it wasn't him as he'd perhaps hoped. Not this year anyway. Questions about whether he'll continue to have focus in the later phases, but he insists his focus is the first phase for now.
The first thing we're doing is getting our hostages back. Okay, and that's what people wanted more than anything else. They wanted these hostages back that have lived in hell like nobody has ever even dreamt possible. And after that, we'll see. But they've agreed to things, and I think it's going to move along pretty well. There will be pullbacks. There will be a lot of things that are happening. You know, I gave you a whole list of 22 different things that will take place. And I think it'll take place, and I think you're going to end up with peace in the Middle East.
Is that realistic? Well, there's momentum, but it's a fragile process. The UK Foreign Secretary in Paris to discuss what Gaza's post-war future should look like with other European and Arab countries.
It's immensely important that that first phase is now implemented, and now the negotiations with the US, with Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and others will be focusing on phase 2 with all of our support as they go forward.
This morning in Hostages Square, worshippers held prayers. There are so many unanswered questions about the path ahead. If and how Hamas will disarm, how to rebuild Gaza, and how to rebuild trust.
Well, joining me now is Barbara Leaf, the former Assistant Secretary of State under the Biden administration. Thank you very much for joining us. Can we talk about the challenges now in terms of making sure that stage 1 works? Like, how do you monitor whether Hamas are doing what they said they would do and whether the Israeli troops are in the right place?
Well, this is going to be a really difficult piece of it, and we saw it before when there were efforts to open up the aperture to push in humanitarian assistance, that things bogged down very quickly. One of the things that occurred rapidly was looting of trucks so that food and other vital items never got to the intended public. That's going to be a good part of this, is because there's no security force on the other side. There's no law and order on the other side. So that's going to be very difficult. And part of the task will be to get international NGOs, UN perhaps, I'm wondering if they're actually thinking of bringing in UNRWA again. It's not quite clear from the agreement, but you need a network of workers who can help distribute food in the first place, which is going to help alleviate not just suffering, but bring down the whole temperature of things.
Yes, I mean, how do you deal with this apparent contradiction of the fact that Hamas are told they have to be removed from the situation and disarm, whilst also being de facto in charge of security and ensuring security in the situation?
Well,
I mean, are they effectively left in place?
But for more than a year, they have not controlled things. We should be very clear on that point. It has been a state of uncontrolled anarchy in the Gaza Strip for more than a year. So just asserting law and order will be one of the really key tasks, because it will also go to the ability of people to get food.
And at what point do you think we see an international force go into Gaza?
Well, we don't have any indications yet. The administration and other officials, foreign officials, have been mum on that point. I have no doubt that there is a lot of work being done very, very rapidly in capitals, but it's quite a thing to do, and you've got to sync up the mission of such a force with the IDF, so that there's not just a handoff, but there's an understanding of who's doing what. And in the first instance, you really need just local policing, law and order. And there are Palestinian Authority security forces who have not worked in years, but who are there in the Strip, who could be called back to work.
Does that mean acknowledging that there are security forces, as in police, in Gaza, who are not Hamas?
Yes. And there are also, it's always been the case that there were police and others who worked in the civil administration, if you will, of the de facto authority, as everybody called it, Hamas, who were not there so much for ideology purposes, but to have a paycheck. So there is a piece, there is language in the 20 points that speaks to this issue of how Hamas members or fighters can either lay down their arms or essentially pledge their commitment to nonviolence. So there is a process there for whether they're de facto authority police or others to essentially say, yeah, I'm not with that group anymore, and I'm going to help put things back together.
Right, so let's talk about getting to stage two. I mean, what is the administration's role now in getting on to this next phase of the talks and making sure this is not just a ceasefire and hostage handover?
Well, we've seen that there are several hundred U.S. military members coming to Israel to help do a sort of civ-mil fusion cell of some kind. They're not going to go into Gaza, but they're going to help in the first stages of coordination. And as I said earlier, coordination is acutely difficult going from outside into the Strip and then with virtually no network to work against. So there will be a flood of people going in who, again, are UN and international NGOs. And the U.S. Military members will be outside helping to put all of the pieces together between the international side, the Israelis, and other member governments. But the U.S. is going to have to continue to play a leading role in corralling things together, deconfliction, and I don't mean in a military sense, but in a logistical sense in the first instance. And then we'll see who gets made point man. I mean, we have every reason to think that Tony Blair is going to have a key operational role, but one of his first tasks is to get member governments to put together, whether they're constabulary forces or others, some sort of elements to a security force. He's also got to begin to consult, if he hasn't already, consult with Palestinians and Palestinians who are in Gaza, who can be part of this governance structure and security structure.
When you look at how the sheer force of Trump personality has been instrumental in us getting to this point, does it make you think that we could have got here a lot sooner?
I don't know. All of us think about that issue every day. All of us who worked on Gaza for 15 months think about that every day. It's a very difficult question to answer. Sometimes it's the confluence of events. September 9th was a catalyst for action, not just by the American side, but by the Gulf countries. People were shocked into action. There was also just the horrendous state of the humanitarian conditions that had fallen precipitously since the beginning of March, with the closure of all food and humanitarian goods into the Strip for 2+ months. So that a series of factors galvanized. And yes, you had the brute force of Trump's personality and his willingness to use both the public podium and the private channels.
Do you think President Biden was unable to put that kind of pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu, or unwilling?
I don't know. I think it was a mix of things, and I think he had his own style for doing so. And he was, he was faced with a long-standing, deep-going commitment to Israel's security, and there was a sort of ring of fire of threats throughout that period that only began to be taken apart in the late fall of last year. I don't know, it's hard for me to say, but the personality of a president always factors into this, but there are lots of other factors that came into play, and they were geopolitical in nature, and especially September 9th, which shocked forward momentum.
And how confident do you feel that there will not be a return in perhaps a more limited sense to military action? You know, I mean, where I'm standing, a lot of people here who come up and talk to you just say they don't really believe that this will lead to a long-term process, and that there will still be the people they regard as their enemy who will need to be killed.
There may be, and in fact I'm quite certain, talking to Israelis and Palestinians over the last few days, there is a deep-going fatalism about whether this ever can be set to rights. That is the enormous task ahead, and I don't underestimate the supreme challenges of that effort.
Barbara Lee, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.